Hello everybody. Are you all set? Okay. So in this session you would normally be working on your assignment, but for the first couple weeks, so this week and next week at least, you will be learning ArchiCAD for obvious reasons, is that you probably don't know how to start your assignment yet, seeing you don't know the actual software. So I'm going to try and get through as much as I can today. And we're going to be starting off, or kind of extending from where we left off on Monday. And I kind of showed you the wall tool, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in it. Now, I am going to go through pretty much every single tool that's in here. Yep, I think every single one. Maybe not that one. But, but no, we're going to go through all these. Now, I'm going to spend a lot of time on the wall tool, but you'll find that what you learn from that, you're going to know half the other tools almost immediately. Okay? We're also going to look at the mesh tool, and then I want you to kind of do a bit of practice. Now, I think I sent out an email regarding I'll just talk about this quickly, the notebook assignment, and there is information about the notebook assignment in that handout I gave you. Which, by the way, if you missed a class or you've left your assignment behind or whatever, I usually leave any spares in that little cupboard at the back of the room. So if you're in here and I left my assignment at home, usually there's a copy in there. By all means, just help yourself. All right, the notebook assignment is every fortnight you'll get a tiny little assignment. And it's just really meant to kind of mop up all the little bits that something like an exam would make you study for, and doesn't really fall into an assignment. So this week's one is just looking at ArchiCAD and its use in the real world, and also forums and other support networks that you guys can use outside of this class or after you've gone into the real world. So what I want you to do is, in less than 200 words, and most of this is that sort of thing, so less than a page, just to write up, in this case, talk about ways in which ArchiCAD can be used, focus on the work from companies that use it, and put links to these sites within your text. Try to find work from both New Zealand and abroad. And then I also want you to have a look for some forums. Okay, so a good place to start would be Graphisoft's website, which looks something like that. So graphisoft.co.nz. This is also where you can get yourself a free copy of ArchiCAD. Okay, now you're going to have to jump through some hoops. So initially you'll get a 1-month license, and within that month you can apply for a student 1-year license. They'll give you all the information and hoops that you need to jump through. So that's well worth it. Try to get the 1-year license before your 1-month license expires, for obvious reasons. But yeah, you'll be able to download it and install it on your own home computer. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah, so the Mac and PC, basically identical. I think there might be 1 or 2 plugins possibly that don't work on the Mac, but I'm not even sure. They'd be pretty obscure. There's pretty much all the plugins, all the libraries, all that sort of stuff is all the same. Only difference is the command key and the control key get switched around. That's about it, really. All right. Okay, so let's pop back into ArchiCAD. So, yesterday we kind of just really looked at navigating around in the 2D view, and we drew some walls. So let's just expand on that. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is all the settings for the wall tool. Okay? So remember, if we go down, we select the wall tool, up here we get this info box, and it's got a whole bunch of settings. If you click this little wall icon here, or you double click the wall tool, or you go Command T, or you go some other option, you will bring up the settings. Command T is by far the easiest, and if you get used to using that, you'll find it so much easier. You just select something, go Command-T, bang, settings pop up. If you like to remember it by you bring up the settings, then you'll remember Command-T. All right, so in these settings, we have a whole bunch of stuff. Now, what I need to talk to you about is this bottom part. I'll redraw this later. We have three types of data in CAD and GIS, or anything that's kind of vector-based, Illustrator, InDesign. Three major types of data: point data, vector data, and polygon data. Okay? So these three different types of data. So point data is a single point. Okay? So usually a location in space in our case, although if it's an Illustrator file, a location on your piece of paper. If it was Maya, it would be a single point in a three-dimensional space. Okay? In our case, it might be a point on our piece of paper. That point has information attached to it. Okay, so it's got data attached to it. So in this case, a chair would be point data. Okay, when I want to, if I'm using my CAD program and I go click, I want to put a chair there. It's a single point. There's information attached to that about the geometry that makes up the chair, where the chair is, how much it costs, what colour it is, where it's located relative to that point that I just defined. Okay. Vector data is like walls, so there's at least 2 points. You're saying, here's a point in space, and here's another point in space, and they're connected by an imaginary line. Okay, and we can attach all sorts of information to that. So, for example, with a wall, there's the height of the wall, the thickness of the wall, the material the wall is made of, how much it costs per square metre, you know, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Then we have our polygon data. And so polygon data is simply 3 points that define a surface. Okay, so this could be our terrain. We've got 1, 2, 3 points. You connect these with these imaginary lines and you're defining a shape. That's a minimum of 3 points. Okay, yes, you can have lots more points. You need at least 3 points and you can define a surface. This is also how 3D models are created. So when you have a whole lot of points in space and they're all connected to make a surface, it looks like a three-dimensional object. Incidentally, they don't have any mass to them. There's nothing that actually defines what's inside there, other than a rule that says, well, if I've got this entire closed space, therefore the centre is solid. In actual fact, it's empty, and you'll find that if you go inside one of your models and you go inside a wall, it'll be hollow. Yeah. Okay, the software gets around it by, if you cut through it, it knows that this is an enclosed space and it will pretend it's solid, but it isn't. That's why you can walk through objects. All right, so that's our three types of data. You have to keep that into mind, especially if we're drawing walls. If I'm drawing the walls and I've measured the outside of this building, and I go, right, this outside wall here is 5 metres, I need the wall to fall inside of that 5 metres. If it falls on the outside of that 5 metres, I've just made my building a little bit larger. It'll be the length of the wall plus the thickness of the wall on each end. Okay, so I need the wall to be on the inside of that vector. If I was splitting this room in half, and I want it smack bang in half, and I define a line through the centre of it, I need the wall centred on either side of that line. Otherwise, one room would be slightly smaller than the other. Make sense? Okay, if I'd measured this room from the inside, and I go and put that into the computer, I'd need the walls to fall on the outside of my measured line, because otherwise the room would shrink. Cool? And we can see that defined up here. See? So that arrow, that line with the arrow defines the vector that you drew and which side the wall is falling on. Okay, some things this isn't relevant. If it was polygon data, well, you're defining these 3 points, the volume's always inside those 3 points. It can't fall outside it. You define the edges of a concrete slab. You don't have to say which side of the line is that the slab appears. It can only be on the inside of those 3 points. I suppose if it was 3 points and it went around the entire globe, except the inside, then you might be able to have a case. But generally speaking, it's all enclosed in that space. Point data, of course, it could be anywhere. We'll get to that. Okay, so all of this information in here is all attached, in this case, to a vector. Again, a vector can be multiple points. There's lots of ways of defining the rules. We'll see later on, we'll see, what have I done with my pen? I've gone and walked off with it. Splines, and they are vector data as well. So they'll have, let's say, 3 points here. Okay, and it has information attached to here that says, when you're at this point, go in that direction, and it will go, and then it will go like this. Okay, so they don't have to be straight lines, but they have like rules attached to those points that define how the shape, the line is, or the vector between those points are. So those splines are still vector data. Okay, they're still two-dimensional, because I suppose they could be three-dimensional. But yeah, there's a line flowing from one point to the next. All right. So what else can we define? We've got here the height of our wall. Now, there's actually two ways of defining the height of a wall. You could say my wall is 5 meters high, or you could say the base of my wall is at 1 meter and the top of my wall is at 6 meters. Both are exactly the same, just two different ways of thinking of the same thing. And it totally depends on what your project is. If you had a height restriction and you were not allowed to go higher than 25 meters above sea level, then you would set the top of your wall at 25 meters. Okay, and the bottom of your wall is like, well, okay, that's sitting at the 20 meter contour, so therefore I'd set the base of my wall at 20 meters. Okay, I don't really care how high the wall is, that's where I have to build it. Okay, if I was building a 5 meter wall and it's on the 20 meter contour, I can say, right, here's my wall, it's 5 meters tall and it's 20 meters up. Same thing, just in different ways. Yes, you could always go, well, if it's the top of the wall is at 25 meters and the bottom of the wall is at 15.75 meters and I minus that number from this number, I'll get the height of the wall and I could put that in there. By all means do. All right. So if you wanted to do that, you'll actually notice, so see it says 2450. Over here it says T and B. In other words, the top and the base. Okay, so in this case, pretty much the same numbers. The top's at 2450, the base is at 0. But if I raise the base up 1,000, okay, that means my wall is now 1450 high, but it's elevated 1 meter up. Same thing. Cool? All right. What else have we got in there? So now we know we can elevate a wall. Okay, so we've got one side centered or on the opposite side. You can change any of these at any point in time. So if you went and drew all your walls of this building and all the walls fell on the outside and then later on you realised you'd made a mistake, not a big deal. You just select all the walls and say go on the inside and they'll all flip over to the other side. Okay, so these can be changed whenever you like. Oh, this one here is actually like an offset. So you can say, okay, well, yes, I'm doing the outside wall, but I measured it from the base and there's actually an overhang because of the weatherboards or something. So I need you to actually place the wall 20 mil off to one side and the rest of the wall on the other side of the line. That's what that offset there is. It's very seldom you'd use it, but it's there available for you all. The next set of icons underneath that are, I am actually recording this now, yep, are two very logical ones. A straight wall, in other words, the wall is a uniform thickness all the way through. The next option, though, allows you to have a wall that starts off at, in this case it's set to 90 each end, which doesn't make much sense. It starts off at one thickness and goes to another thickness. So if you had a big 5 meter thick concrete wall, you know, retaining a cliff or something, and that went down to just a little brick wall, you could put one of those walls in between to go from your 90 mil wall to your 5 meter thick wall, which is pretty thick. And then the next one is weird. It's a polygonal wall. So it can be a wall that has just some sort of weird random shape, maybe like a bunker or something like that, you know, where it might change thickness as you go along it. Again, probably something you'd never use, but one day you might find an excuse for it. In most cases, I would use a slab for that. However, if you wanted to put a window through it, so if it was like a concrete bunker and it had really thick and then it kind of thinned out and then it got thick again and then you wanted windows going through it, that's what you'd end up using. All right, now underneath that, that's interesting, you can't have a wall. Oh. Underneath that you can have slanted walls. It goes without saying really, a wall that's on an angle. A wall, what do they call it, canted? One that has, I don't know what they actually call that one. Oh. Double slanted, oh there you go. Where each side of the wall has a different angle. So you might have it straight up on one side and then on an angle on the other side. Okay. And then the fourth option there is a complex wall. And we're going to get into this more in assignment 2. But you can have a wall that has a lot going on. So for example, these walls here, they've got like a concrete base that comes up and then it kind of slopes in and then there's brick. And then I think there's another change in colour of brick. So there's like an orange stripe. And then there's more brick and then it goes all the way up and then there's another orange stripe. And then it goes up a bit further and it comes back out over the eaves. You can do that all in one go. So you just create it in section and then you can draw your walls in and it has all of these things all embedded in it. And they can be pretty cool. Very cool for making like skateboard ramps and all sorts of stuff. Canals, things like that. Streets, even. Because you can draw like the road surface and the curb and the footpath and all that sort of carry on. And then you just draw it. And they all connect together very beautifully. All right. So yeah, we definitely get there. There's going to be a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about this in the future. Now there is one little gotcha here. I'm just going back to a standard wall. See this? This is the thickness of the wall, but it's greyed out. And I cannot change the thickness of the wall, which is kind of frustrating. And it's a bit of a gotcha, and I wish it wasn't the default setting, but it is. See this here in the structure. So all of this stuff here is, again, more information attached to our drawing. Most of this is for the plan view. Well, the plan view and the section views. So it's what it looks like when you cut through it. There's a few little rules in there. I don't really want to go into stories too much, but ArchiCAD does have stories attached to it. So that basically means like sets of drawings stacked vertically on top of each other. So in your case, you might want to do, for example, sea level, and that's where your terrain lives, right? So everything's relative to 0 being mean sea level or something like that. Then you've got all your contours stacked above that. But your site is at the 25.6 metre contour, and instead of thinking of everything above sea level, which would kind of be annoying, you might decide, right, my datum is at 26.5 and everything on the site is relative to that point. Okay, it makes it a lot easier and it's quite a normal way of working. So then you might have a second story that starts at 26.5 metres, which means that when you go and place something at 0, it would actually be on the 26.5 metre contour. Okay, so I quite often use the floor level in the house as my 0, and then everything's relative to the floor level in the house. Totally depends on the site though. Okay, if it's a slightly sloping site, it's like, well, yeah, okay. Usually you can see that whether the floor level is outside of the house as well. Depends on the house. But that means that I can go, okay, well, I know that this is a metre lower than the floor level, and that's 5 metres up the back of the property and that sort of thing, Totally depends on how you want to work. Every project is going to be different. Generally, though, we would probably just get rid of the other stories and only have one floor and everything would be on it. But let's say we did want to have our mesh or our terrain on sea level. We would then go in here and say, well, actually, see it says here, show. So the home story in that case would be sea level. So that's the story or the drawing that it lives on. But we want it to show on every other one. So here it says show projection. Show on stories, home story only. We would say on all stories, which there would be an option in there somewhere. Okay, all relevant stories. In other words, if if our mesh goes up into our site, we would see it, which would be very convenient. But we'll talk about stories a bit later on. More to do with the second assignment. All right. However, getting back to my problem of my wall not being able to be changed. See here it says cut fill is exterior stud 90. If I click on that, you can see we've got two types of fill. One type is what you'd expect to see, you know, all sorts of things, earth, you know, dashed lines, cut stone, common brick, concrete block, etc., etc. The other ones down on this side, composite structures. These are really cool, although, of course, it's a little bit of a gotcha when you first start in ArchiCAD. They have a set thickness. These are awesome, because and you can do this for walls, slabs, and roofs. The only difference between walls, slabs, and roofs, walls are like that, slabs are like this, roofs are like that. And there's kind of a grey area in between each of them anyway. So, a roof doesn't need to be a roof, it could be a wheelchair ramp. Okay, it's just a structure on an angle, really. All right. Okay, so those complex, do you want to bring that up again? Those complex structures, somewhere in the program, buried in there, which we will see one day, you can actually define the thickness of things. So let's say we're doing a weatherboard house. We could say, well, there's weatherboards, then there's some building paper, then there's the timber frame, then there's some insulation of some sort inside there as well, then there's the jib, then there's the undercoat, and then there's the paint, you know, and then whatever else. Okay, and so you define all of those thicknesses, and then you can just go through and draw the walls, and they'll all join together, and all the fills will all mesh together nicely, etc., etc. It can get even more complex than that, but yeah. With slabs, brilliant. We could have artificial turf, then some sort of layer of rubber, then the concrete, then the hard core, then some dirt, and wherever we go and draw this thing, we just go. If we did a section through it, it'd show every single layer already stacked all nicely. If that's stepped up, we would see it, you know, stepped up. So we can make a couple of different versions of it. So then the client can say, well, actually, that concrete slab you've got needs to be thicker. Not a problem. You go through, you change the setting of that complex structure, and all of your slabs would get thicker, and all the sections would be updated, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very, very powerful. However, at this level, it's a little bit confusing because you can't change the thickness. So what we do is we're going to change exterior stud 90 to one of these other ones that just says solid fills, cut stone, and you'll see now the 90 is editable, so you can change the thickness now. Okay, so if you can't change the thickness, chances are you're using a composite fill. All you have to do is go into there where it says cut fill, change it to something else, and you'll be able to change the thickness of the wall within those settings. Does that make sense? I know it's a huge amount of information. This lecture is being recorded, so you can listen to it again. We can listen to this morning's one. Perhaps I explained it clearer there. All right. As I was saying before, these things, so we're going to see the exact same setting in the slab settings and in the roof settings. You'll see exactly the same thing. Cool? All right. Is there anything else in there we need to look at? Oh, yes. The most fun of all of these settings is the one that says model. This is the texture, or the surfaces, if you like, in the 3D view. So if we want to make our wall red, we can pop in there and choose paint 01, or 06, sorry, and it's red. Notice it's got a little padlock. That little padlock just basically means paint all of the surfaces the same colour. Okay, so if we didn't want that, if we want them all different colours, we can unlock it and select a different texture for each surface. Now, when I say each surface, it's actually, so if you have a look at this little diagram, see it's got like a line with an arrow. So that's the vector that we drew. So we're doing the outside wall, and we went click, click. Okay, and the vector's on the outside wall. That means that if I wanted that outside wall to be brick, it would be this one here. Okay, if I want the edge to be, I don't know, brick, then I'd change that one to brick as well. On the inside, I would want, you know, this kind of creamy coloured texture. Okay, and so that'd be on the inside. Make sense? All right, I'm going to draw some. Draw some stuff. Okay, so have a little bit of play around with that. So what I need you to do now is to get some stuff on your screen, because we're going to drop into 3D and just play around with navigating in there as well. All right. One thing that's really important when you're drawing walls, you'll probably notice that the cursor changes. The cursor changes its icon when you hover over lines. So if I draw a vector, so if this is one wall, right? I need this one when I come down. I need it to join to that. If you miss it, if you went what? The walls will probably not join up. And sometimes it doesn't look very obvious. It might be right about here. And so you end up with one wall like this and one wall like that, and they just don't join. Chances are those vectors that you drew didn't line up. Okay, they didn't attach. So as far as the computer is concerned, those walls don't join together. It does do a pretty good job of guessing what you actually intended to do. But it's quite important, yeah. So if you move that just away a little bit, you see? They don't join. Yeah? They do all sorts of weird things because they're not joining. So you'll notice, so when you go and put your cursor over the end of one of those walls, it will change. So usually I think it'll have like a little tick, which means it's going to snap to the end of the other vector. So really that's all you're doing, is you're defining vectors. The computer's doing the rest of the work for you. That's nice, isn't it? All right, we've got something on the screen looking cool, looking flash. Yeah, you'll see that the complex walls join up beautifully with the other walls. And when you drop into 3D, you'll see they actually butt up correctly. They've actually reduced the number of complex walls, and there used to be this nice big curving wall in there that they've seemed to have removed for some reason. Every year there's a new release of ArchiCAD. Every year they do some really cool stuff and remove some stuff that was really handy. Okay, have you all got something on your screen? Doesn't matter what. Hit F3. Now, hopefully, if IT have done their job correctly, when you hit F3, it goes to the 3D view. You shouldn't have to hold down the function key now. If it doesn't, let me know, and I'll complain. All right. Now, you've probably already discovered, and by default, it should actually be on the Orbit tool. So the Orbit tool, if you have a look at the bottom of this screen, it looks like an arrow, a circular arrow. So what that does is it's as if you are holding an object in your hand and rotating it around, okay, and looking at it from different angles, which is all cool. However, we've got another way of navigating around in here. I don't know what I actually call it, but I call it the running man. Because it looks like a little dude running. And it's just next to that. You see a little man? And if you click on him, for one, this window pops up. Now, if you've ever played like a shoot-'em-up game on the PC, you'll already know how to use this because it uses exactly the same keyboard shortcuts or key commands, controls, whatever. So you go Explore 3D, you'll find that the mouse is like a tripod. Okay, so it's like you're sitting there looking around, up, down, left and right. Okay, if you use the cursor keys, you can go forwards, backwards, and slide left and right. Okay, kind of like this. Okay? Or if you are doing the gaming, you'd be used to using W, A, S, and D, which does exactly the same thing. It's a little bit more convenient because it's on the left-hand side of the keyboard, and that's usually where your left hand is sitting. The little running dude at the bottom there. Cool. And after a while, you get really good at using it. Page up and page down will lift you up and down. If you're moving a bit slow, the plus and minus will zoom it up and slow it down. Or you can hold down the shift key temporarily and that will speed you up. So sometimes it's like, I just got to run over there and then have a look around. So you can just hold down the shift key and you'll move faster. Okay, or the plus and minus. If you forget all this, which I wouldn't blame you for doing so, remember when you click on that running man, all of the directions are there as well.
What happens if you click to go insert this information next time? What's the up? The down is C, okay, so
yeah, page up and page down.
I didn't know how to play the C and spacebar.
Yeah, C and spacebar will page up, page down. Hurry is shift, increase speed, minus speed, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and if you click the mouse or you hit escape, you'll go back into editing. Actually, I've got a 3D mouse, which if you're doing a lot of CAD work, I'd highly recommend. They're really good. It's just like a little object, and if you lift it up and push it down, you can move it in all sorts of different directions, and it'll navigate around in there. And you can do it while you're drawing. I'll bring it in, you guys can have a play with it. But yeah, I get so used to it that I look like an idiot when I haven't got it because I can't navigate any program. All right. How are we doing so far? Going to be watching the video later on? Remember the video? You can rewind, pause, rewind, play, rewind, play. All right. Now, actually, sorry, there is a big thing I haven't talked about. I'm going to talk just quickly about layers and how they're different to what you're used to in something like Photoshop. Okay, layers in a CAD program, or actually anything that uses vector data and point data and this sort of carry on, works quite different to a program like Photoshop. Photoshop is all pixels, and I'm going to talk about pixels and raster information next week. But Photoshop is, if you can kind of think of it as like layers of acetate with a drawing on each one, and they're stacked vertically on top of each other. Okay, so if you've got a 5 megapixel image, you get another layer, you've got another 5 megapixel image, you get another layer, you've got another 5 megapixel image, so now you're up to 15 megapixels. Okay, and so every time you add a layer, you end up with, another whole set of information, another whole set of little pixels. In this kind of setup, okay, so think programs like Illustrator, InDesign, ArchiCAD, any 3D application, they're more about objects. Okay, so it's not a layer of acetate with pixels on it. It's a chair or a fill or a line or a wall or whatever. Okay, a bit of text. They're like little individual objects, and they're kind of grouped together in layers. So they kind of, if I've got all of my chairs on the chair layer, they're not stacked vertically on top of each other. They're just grouped together in a layer. If I switch that layer off, all the chairs disappear. Okay? So layers are very important. So they are slightly different. Illustrator is kind of actually annoying. It's kind of in between because it has all the objects, but the objects are actually ordered on top of each other as well. So it's kind of half of one and half of the other. But the point is they don't destroy each other. Okay, if you put two circles, you've got a circle and a square, and you drop the circle over the square on the same layer in Photoshop, you've just destroyed the square. Okay, it's now some other blob, a circly, squarey shape. Don't know what that's called, but you know what I mean? Okay, you go move the circle away from it. If it's on the same layer, you don't have your square anymore. It's been destroyed. Okay, in these programs, it's not like that. You move the circle over the square. It doesn't destroy it. It's still a circle and a square. Make sense? Okay, everything you draw, you should always be thinking what layer it goes on. Okay, so if you're drawing a whole bunch of cars, you probably want to jump in here, create a new layer, and call it cars. And then you do a whole bunch of trees. You're going to come in here, create a trees layer, do a whole bunch of trees, and you're going to do rugby posts, sports fields, etc., etc. And so you always should be thinking, what am I going to draw and what layer am I going to put it on? Otherwise, what will happen is you'll get way down the track and you decide, okay, I want to do a cross section, but I want to turn all the trees off. And you go and switch off, what's the default one? Objects and furniture or something. You go and switch it off and every object disappears in your entire drawing. And you go, So then you have to go around selecting all the individual trees and moving them over to the trees layer and then taking all the cars and putting them onto a cars layer. And it takes forever to do, and you so wish that you just put them on a layer in the first place and it wouldn't have been so painful. So you should always think about what layer things are going on. Right. Oh, sorry. That was a bit mean, wasn't it? Command L. Or, see this little thing up here? That, or, options, element, attributes, layers. Command L is by far the easiest. So, whenever you're doing something, Command L, boom, the layers pop up. You'll find that there's at least 2 ways to do anything in ArchiCAD. And it's just totally up to your own personal preference. Some people love to use menus, some people like to click icons, some people like keyboard shortcuts. I prefer keyboard shortcuts. Alright, so here's all our layers. Now you can do a few things in here. You can lock a layer. So very handy, especially if it's something very important like your terrain. You've built your terrain, it's perfect, you can lock it. That means you can't accidentally move it or elevate it or manipulate it in some way, delete it. It stays where it is, because that can be quite disastrous when you go and accidentally move. You think you're moving something, you accidentally move the entire terrain off to one side. Then you start going and putting trees down and cars and whatever else. And then all of a sudden you realise that on the other side of your site you've got all these trees and houses and buildings floating off the edge of a cliff because you moved the ground out from underneath them. And then you cry. And after a few more hours you've got it all fixed again. So it is quite a smart idea to lock things, especially large slabs and buildings and things that you've spent a lot of time on getting right. You can poke it in the eye and it will become invisible. Okay, so that's the equivalent of switching the layer off in Photoshop. I think it uses the same icon actually. And then there's this other cryptic looking block. What that does, if you click that, when it goes into 3D, is it'll just be represented by a little wireframe box around it. So you might want to have, like in 2D, you want to see the trees in there, but in 3D you don't really want all the trees everywhere because they're getting in your face. There's just too many polygons and it's a bit slow. Oh, there you go. See, so the walls have been turned into this, I don't even know, what does it call it? Does it have a name? Wireframe. Oh, there you go. So it gets turned into a wireframe. You can see straight through it. So it can be quite handy. So you still see where the object is, but you don't see all the detail. It's not as solid. So, and I do get this occasionally, people going, all my trees have turned into empty boxes. What have I done? And it's usually that, you've gone to hide a layer and you've missed and hit that little wireframe solid box icon. Cool? Yeah. You can actually do it, and you can make everything wireframe as well if you right click. Yeah. But it's not going to look like much at the moment. That can be quite handy if you've got lots and lots and lots of trees and objects and things like that, and the computer's just grinding to a halt. Sometimes flicking it into wireframe speeds it up. But it doesn't make much sense to anybody other than yourself, because you just see this massive lines everywhere, and if you've drawn it yourself, you know exactly what everything is. If you go and look at somebody else's screen who's done that, it just looks really confusing. All right. Sorry, I've just lost where I was up to. Layers. Okay. Another handy thing with layers is we've got over here, and you've probably done this in Photoshop where you've got certain layer combinations. So there's there's the background image, and then there's the people, and then there's the text. And sometimes you want to show just the people and the background but not the text, and then sometimes you want to show the text and the background but not the people, and that sort of carry on. And so you're constantly switching layers on and off. which can be quite frustrating. On the left-hand side here, we've got a thing called layer combinations, and what that does is it just simply stores layers being switched on and off. So if you wanted to have the trees on, the cars on, the terrain on, but no buildings, you could switch all the layers on and off and then save that as a combination. So the next time you want that layer combination, you just click on it and go, right, that's what I want. Now I want everything back on again, you can go all. Okay, I'm doing a whole bunch of 2D stuff. I don't want any trees or cars or anything like that. I just want to see the terrain with the contours on it. You could save that as a layer combination. So it's just a nice, easy way of flicking between it. Otherwise, and if you find yourself constantly doing this, going Command L, switch that on, switch that off, switch that on, switch that off, switch that on. Yeah, okay, oh no, I forgot to switch that one off. And it's like you do some stuff and it's like, now I've got to switch everything back on again because I don't know where that, and you find that you're constantly doing that. That's when you should really be using these layer combinations. Okay.
Do you make it up and give it a name?
Yep, so you just poke things on and off and away you go. Now, there's some already in here. So do you want to click on just any of those ones on the left-hand side, like details or something? Elevations, there you go. So you can see it's switching things on and off. See, so it's switched on elevations, documentation, it's switched off other things. You can see them all changing. And you can update this whenever you like. So if you decided, well, actually, all of my cross-sections, and we're going to see this later on, and we're going to talk about this more later on when we look at doing cross-sections, we can attach a layer combination to our sections. So that means that if the client says, I want to see trees in all my sections, it's like, oh, okay, well, that's going to take me about 3 days. All you do is you pop in here, you go to your sections layer combination, you poke trees in the eye, so that it's showing and you go update. All of your sections and elevations will all get updated automatically. And all you have to do is hit print and all the new sections are going to come out with all the trees switched on. And you charge them for 5 days' work. Cool? So all of these sort of things all trickle on. So it's, and we're going to see that as we go into, we can save views and those views can have layer combinations attached to them. Then those views get put onto a piece of paper. And they have, all sorts of settings attached to them. And then those sheets of paper get bundled up and spat out as PDFs or to the printer. And you have different sets of drawings. So you might have imperial measurements for the US client and, metric measurements for the New Zealand manufacturers, whatever it might be. And so it's, ArchiCAD has got some really amazing workflow. So in theory, if you're doing everything nicely, and the client says, I want to move that tree, not a problem, you move the tree, you hit print. All of your documentation, all your sections, your elevations, your renderings even, all get updated and spat back out the other end. Cool? All right, so we've talked about layers, we've talked about layer combinations, we've talked about the wall tool in quite some detail. How are we doing? 11:46, when did we finish? 12:30? Is it 12:30? Okay, we're doing very well. Is there any questions? Do you want to have a little bit of a play? Or should we just keep on rocking? Have a little bit of a play. Yeah. How long did it take me to do the mesh last time? Okay, are we all happy navigating around in the 3D view? If you get stuck or lost in the 3D view, which is incredibly easy to do, you run off into infinite space, whoopsie daisies, and you can't find your way back home. The easiest thing to do, remember, next to the running man, there's that magnifying glass with a little wiry bit stuck in it. If you click that, it's going to just recenter everything. So just go, click, bang. You could go through your view history as well, but sometimes when you get lost, that might take a while, and you keep trying to find your way back home. All right. Anything else? There's also actually, see over here, I haven't really talked about the navigator yet, but there's this generic perspective and generic axonometric. if you click on the generic perspective, it'll actually take you to the default, the first place that you entered the 3D view. It's actually a saved view, and we're going to talk about saved views one day. If you're in generic axonometric, though, you know what axonometric is? Axonometric is like a, well, I can't say perspective drawing, but similar, except for all the objects are to scale. So the back wall is going to be the same size no matter how close it is to the camera. So it looks a little bit weird. You can't go into walk around the site in this view and you'll find that the running man is greyed out, because the whole thing, if you're moving into a perspective space, as objects close to you get bigger. And axonometric, that's just not possible, because it's just drawing it in a different fashion. Everything's all to scale. So you can take a scale ruler to an axonometric and you'll find that this front wall is exactly the same height as the back wall. But the weird thing is our brain doesn't interpret it the same way. So it looks like the back wall is bigger than the front wall. If I measured that, it would be exactly the same height. So in theory, you could put a scale bar on that and you could actually measure things, but it just looks odd. So perspective, things that are further away are smaller than things that are close up. The same way in which we view our world. Cool? What's the deal with roofs?
Yeah, the roof keeps like going on the ground instead of on the
So the base height of the roof needs to be at the top height of the wall. Yeah, by default it's 0. Again, didn't used to be. It used to be 2450. Yeah, you'd think they'd have the default for the roof height being 2450, but you don't. Okay. All right, you guys are racing away. Crikey. All right, I'm going to talk about the mesh tool. Okay, because this is the tool that you're going to be using a lot for this assignment. Okay. What is the mesh tool? Well, the mesh tool kind of breaks our rules a little bit, actually. Because remember we were talking about these 3 types of data? Technically it's polygon data. Okay? Although it's kind of like we've got little points on there for a spot height, but we could also draw a contour line, which in theory is a vector. Okay? But really it's polygon data. 3-dimensional polygon data. So I'm going to draw one up. Nice and simple. Now just make sure that this is all back to normal. Yep. So here's my nice big square. Actually, I'm just going to go and delete what I've got on my screen at the moment. Sorry. I should have saved it for you. All right. That's just one mesh. Click, click, bang is a mesh. So what have we got? Everything is set to 0, but it's got this big slab of dirt underneath it. And the top surface is at 0. In fact, everything is set to 0 except for that thick bit of slab. Let's bring up the settings. Okay, so we can see a couple of things in here. Actually, I didn't really go over it, and we got a bit out of time this morning. So that top number is how much dirt I'm burying underneath my 0. Now, there's something very important about meshes, and it's a little bit confusing at first. Where's my pen again? Okay? Here's 0, 10 meters. Here's minus 10 meters. Okay? My slab currently looks like this. Cool. So that point, my entire mesh is set to 0. And I've got 1 meter of earth that goes down to the minus 1 meter thing. Okay, so there it says 1 meter, but it means it's got 1 meter underneath it. That's quite handy. Now, if I go and lift up 1 point, so let's see, how do we do that? So I'm going to go, okay, let's go back to here. Now, if you want to edit a mesh, you select the mesh. Okay, this is really important, and least half of you will get stuck with this. Select the mesh and then go back to the mesh tool. It's not entirely necessary at this level, but I'm going to make you do it anyway. So you select the tool, select the mesh, go back to the mesh tool. If I click on one of these existing nodes, you'll see there's a Z. In fact, you'll see a lot of stuff. In fact, I'm going to go through some of these just quickly. We've got the default one, which is the top left, is move that point. So I could change the shape of this mesh to that shape. I can also go Command Z to undo. I can round off a corner, let's say with a 5 meter radius. Whoa, look at that. Okay, I could, notice what happens if I go and try and do something again to this another point, it's going to bring up the last tool that I used. It assumes that I'm running around, filleting corners, which is a good assumption, but it's wrong. So don't panic, just go cancel. Okay, see I'm moving, so I'm moving a point. Don't panic, you just click on the next tool that you want to use. So in this case I want to scale or offset all of the edges. I want to make the whole thing bigger. Okay. What else we got? We've got add a shape. So that means I can put the driveway in or something. I can minus a shape. I'm going to skip that one for a second. I can move the entire object. It's like, whoopsies, that was meant to be down there. Okay, that's the evil one that will move your entire site and leave all your trees and buildings where they were. Which, if you're zoomed in like this, is sometimes not very obvious. It's not going to do anyway. That's fine. Oops. Select, mesh, node. Rotate, mirror, elevate. Elevate again is an evil one for us because we don't really want to elevate our whole mesh, which I'm going to talk about in a second. All right. So this little Z height. I'm going to click on that. So what that is saying is that that node that I've just selected, I'm going to change its elevation. I'm going to change it to 5 meters. So I'm going to go 5, 1, 2, 3, because I'm working in millimeters, and hit OK. Now I go F3, and ooh. Okay. Oh, hang on. I'm just going to change its texture just quickly because it's really hard to see on that screen. To yellow. I think you're right. I think the bronze works better. Okay, so there's my shape. So I've lifted up one node. So I set that to 5 meters. Now now I've got something that looks a bit like this. All right. Okay, so that's its Z height is 5,000. So let's just for a second pretend that what I just drew on there is a wheelchair ramp, right? If I lift that up and put that on the 20 meter contour, this number doesn't actually change. That Z height would still be 5 meters, okay? Because it's relative to the mesh itself. So there's 0 on my mesh and there's 5 meters on my mesh. Where I put that thing doesn't change anything, okay? If I'm building a wheelchair ramp, the bottom of the wheelchair ramp is at 0. The top is at 5 meters. If I go and put that on the 20th story, it's still 0 and 5 meters. The fact is, though, is that 5 meters is now actually 30 meters elevated up in the air. So that means that we should always, for a terrain, have this whole mesh, right, set to 0. Because if we lift it up, our 5 meter contour will now be at 6 meters. And so that gets really confusing when you go and get a wall and you stick it at 5 meters and you've got on the 5 meter contour and it's buried by 1 meter and it's like, what the hell is going on? It's because your entire mesh has been lifted up. Okay? So nearly always we would have this set to, the entire mesh set to 0, meaning that if you set a Z height of 5 meters, it's 5 meters relative to everything else as well. It's all the same numbers. If we lift the entire mesh up, we're going to start burying things by whatever that distance is. Does that make sense? Sort of? Okay, so the numbers that you're entering in that Z height are relative to the mesh itself. Okay, so you put a height at 1 meter and a point at 0, they're always the same. Yeah, well, yes and no. It is, in a way. But if I go into here, I can actually change it so it is just a surface. That's really what we're defining. You see, now it's just a... Yeah, exactly. Except for we can actually... Yeah. But see, yeah, we can make it a hollow object. So like a cardboard box. You know, or something made out of plywood. Although it'd have infinitely thin plywood, but yeah, you get the idea. Yeah. So yeah, if I chop this in half, it will actually show me soil through it. Which we can do. That's its default. Now, what's important though? Yeah, you could set that to 0. But what you have to be careful of, let's say we put a couple of points in here and another one down here. So it goes like that. The bottom, this will just completely go, can't deal with that because the bottom, one of the points just went beneath the mesh. And so it will freak out. So what you have to do then is you have to put in extra soil so that it becomes one big solid again. I'll demonstrate. So if I grab that point and said minus 5 meters, so they'll put it 4 meters beneath. See? And the sides have disappeared. It just goes, you can't do that. You can't have a point beneath the bottom of this object. So what I'd have to do, quite simple really, is give it about, let's say 10 meters of soil. Ching! And the sides reappear. Okay? So now I've got 10 meters of earth to dig into. Okay? So at no point is any point beneath the bottom of the object. Yeah. All right. Let's just go undo. All right. Okay. So that's all cool. What else can we do? Well, we can add points to our mesh now, which is very important. So let's just pop back in here again. I'm going to fit this to view. Nice. Okay. Again, we're going to edit the mesh. So now this is vital. You have to select the mesh and then go back to the mesh tool. If you don't, if you just go to the mesh tool, you'll just start drawing new meshes. So we'll select our mesh, go back to the mesh tool, and I'm going to draw, I'm going to draw a big square in the center. Boom. Ask me a little question. Do you want to add new points or do you want to create a hole? Good question. I want to add new points. It's also asking if I want to fit to user ridges, fit to all ridges, or no surface fitting. What that basically means, it's going to give values to the points I've just created so that they fall on the surface. So I can say, yep, sweet. Let's do user ridges, doesn't really matter. All ridges. Okay. Actually, see, it said all ridges, it's actually added some extra points. If I didn't do that, if I said user ridges, it'll go like that. So what it's done, and it shouldn't really look any different actually. Oh, it does a bit. Oh, you see, if I'd done all ridges, it would have looked identical. Cool. Hasn't changed to what it looked like before. However, if I select it, you'll actually see there's actually other points in there. Cool. What I'm going to do now, if I go and select a point now, actually normally I think for you guys this should be switched off. If I want to make a contour, in this case let's say a building site, right? I want to add a whole bunch of points. I want to add the same value to each one of these points because that's all a contour is. There's a whole bunch of elevations all connected together, but they're all the same elevation. So that's 5 meters, 5 meters, 5 meters, 5 meters, 5 meters, 5 meters, all joined together into one big contour. That's exactly what I'm going to do now. Let's go 5 meters. Oh no, let's go to 500. And I'm going to say apply to all. Cool. Now what that's done is it's run along all of those points and changed them to 2.5 meters. So I should get something that looks like that. Okay, so effectively a 2.5 meter contour. Pretty neat, eh? I have indeed. I have indeed. All right. So we can keep doing this. We can just we can add arbitrary points. So let's say that's kind of cool, but I don't like the shape around here. I want this to kind of be a bit different. So say it's got this polygonal tool. That means I can just draw whatever shape I like. So let's say I want to kind of, maybe I'm going to put a 3 meter contour around here. So make sure you select it, make sure you're on the mesh tool zone. You go 1, 2, 3, something like that. Cool, and I'm going to go add new points, yep. Click on one of those and say I want that to be, I was going to say 3,500 will be nice. Yeah, apply to all. Now that apply to all will only apply it to all the line, or that vector that I just defined. So it's just going to run around adding those points. It's not going to affect any other, it's not going to affect these. Cool. Now sometimes as well you might want to add some points. You can kind of see it's getting a little bit weird over here. See, it's kind of, yeah, and if I add an extra point in here, I can kind of like, you know, manipulate that surface a bit. So what was that, 2.5 meters? So let's add an extra point over here. And make that 2.5 meters as well. I don't want to apply to all. And in fact, you'll notice it automatically switched apply to all off. Because if I said apply to all on the edge, it's going to run around the entire edge, changing all of the outside points to 25 meters. 2.5 meters. Okay, which is, I do not want it to do. And the people who designed the software realize that that's probably not what you want to do.
Do you just add one point on the side that it clicks and then just connect up the other?
Yeah, so it will actually, it's only the outside edge that it does that. So if I go F3 now, cool. So I've kind of reshaped that edge. That's looking quite nice. So I can lift this corner up again. I don't want it to run around the outside, and it won't let me either. Well, it will if I want to, but I don't. Cool. Okay, and I'm just slowly shaping my surface. All right. Yeah, so if you did do that by accident, and I know somebody will in this room, and it's really painful, because you really do have to go, like for your one, you're going to have to go around the outside and just fix up any of the corners, and any of the edges, and put the correct heights in. And if you go around going, right, that's 5 meters, that's 6 meters, that's 7 meters, that's 8 meters, and you had apply to all switched on all the time, all you're doing is you're changing all the ones you just did to 6 meters, and then changing them all to 7 meters, and you're changing them all to 8 meters. And you cry again and get over it, have some lunch, come back and fix it. Which I've just done there just to demonstrate, and you end up with this sort of thing happening. And you go, no, why am I all of a sudden living in a fishbowl? And that's because, yeah, you've been applied it all to the edges. Yep. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know how many undos. I think it's about 25 undos. So if you've gone around and done 26 points, yeah, definitely. Always drop into 3D and check what you've just drawn. See if it looks like how you intended it to look. You'll be surprised a lot of the time. Yeah, it's like, oh, those steps are really flat. I thought they'd be fine. You know, or they're too steep, or that terrain is really steep. I thought it was really flat.
And then you end up like floating half a metre off the ground.
Yeah.
Like you think it should work, so you go into 3D and all of a sudden like all your trees are floating.
Yeah, so when you go and drop in like this, it's like, oh, actually that's pretty steep. That could be hazardous to someone's health. Yeah. Yeah. And you will. You'll definitely get... All right. That's pretty... I managed to get you guys through done about 10 minutes quicker than this morning's group. It's good, eh?
Did you start off exactly like we did? You draw to a square with walls turned on to start your first square, or did you start somewhere else entirely different to do this next?
Oh, yeah, and I just deleted those walls.
Deleted the walls.
Yeah.
Where did you draw? What did you start to do? You started your square. What did you do?
Oh, just the mesh tool.
Just the mesh tool, and it
Yeah.
drew a square.
Yeah, I said just
Click and draw.
click and draw. So you go to the mesh tool. So you've got options there. A funny shaped one. Just like the wall tool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a square mesh. Square on an angle mesh. Actually, this one here, I didn't show this morning's class, but it's quite relevant actually to your studio if you wanted to do it the same way.
Back to your previous tool. What did on the last one?
Actually, you did right. So then you can say, I want a grid of 5 by 5. What's Z3? I don't know. Oh, sorry, that's the corner elevations. That doesn't really matter. Hit OK. And it sets up a grid. Oh, there's also millimeters. I've gone, anyway. So you can actually set up a grid, which for Studio you got given a grid.
Oh, with all those numbers?
Yeah, so you could actually go through and just add the heights.
At every one of those points.
Exactly. Although you wouldn't want to apply it all on, because you'd end up with a world of pain.
Right, so if you put that off with all those numbers, then that will give you the bumpiness of that square.
Change everything.
Yeah. And there is actually a way to import, I can't remember how, but you can, like if you had a spreadsheet with all those numbers, you can actually import that and do it. It'll do it for you.
To know what, if those numbers are just numbers without any lengths and things, you'd need to know the dimensions of
Yeah.
them first, wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
The way they all were, and then you could pop them in and get the shape.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so next week we're going to put down the site aerial photograph into here. So then you could just put that mesh over the top and then plug the numbers in.
So our job at the moment is to try these things out and practice things.
Definitely.
So that's
Yeah. So between now and next week, I want you to play. And play and play and play.
I don't understand.
Playing?
The thing about the ground and the zero and the height and how you made it not be up or down a metre. How did you get it to stay at zero, but you had to make a depth? I don't understand what you meant by where you had.
Yeah, so when I go and build a mesh, right, that mesh is like an object. And this object is placed at a certain elevation. Okay, so in this case, it's placed at 0. Okay, so that's how high this is.
Right, so it's at zero. So that the green is at ground. So
Yeah. So when I add a height to here, I'm saying this is 2.5 meters above that 0.
right.
Which, in this case, is nice and simple. It means it's 2.5 meters up relative to anything.
Anything, right.
But if I lifted this entire mesh up 1 meter, so hang on, let's just, we'll grab a column, right? And I'm just going to make this, oops, sorry, make sure I've got nothing else selected, column. So the base here goes from 0 to 2,450, right? Actually, no, let's just lift this up. What was that was at 2.5 meters, right, this thing here? So if I stick this at 2.5 meters, and pop this here, right? Oh, hang on. Have a look. There it is. So, it is. So if I grab this, if I set this though to 1,000, cool. Notice that this Z height is still 2.5 meters. However, the whole thing's lifted up. So that, and of course, so that 2.5 meters hasn't changed. So if you're designing like a wheelchair ramp, you don't want to be sitting there going, okay, well the bottom of the wheelchair ramp is at 2,150 millimeters above sea level, and the top of the wheelchair ramp is at, you know, that plus 1,200. You know, it'd be a nightmare.
It's kept it the same, you just lifted all your ground up.
Exactly. So I've just grabbed that entire object and lifted it up. Make sense?
Yes, so the things that are sitting on top of it will stay relative to the zero because the yellow's the zero.
I didn't lift them up.
Right.
So I didn't lift that column up.
Always stay the same
Yeah.
on their flat land, but you just put things
So when you edit your mesh points, you're changing the mesh, but you can also edit the whole mesh, so the lift. So you're editing the surface, and then you can lift the whole surface up.
So yeah, so in this case that's kind of confusing because if I go and put something at 2.5 meters, and this is my 2.5 meter contour, that's buried by a meter. And so that's when you go, what the hell is going on? That's at 2.5 meters, that's at 2.5 meters, why don't they line up? Because the entire mesh is lifted up 1 meter. It's like, that should have been 0.
Right, so you basically keep that at 0.
Yeah, and now this,
Don't change that, you'll be fine.
yeah. And it's an easy mistake to make. It's a very easy mistake to make, yeah. Especially if you go, you might go, okay, well, actually I want to lift a whole bunch of stuff up 1 meter. So you select a whole bunch of stuff and you go elevate by 1 meter and you just accidentally lifted up your mesh as well. Yeah, which is lock your mesh. Or as soon as you realise, hang on, all these objects seem to, on the other side, you know, you go, they're all buried. And like the first thing is to go, oh, that's a bit weird, they're buried, and go and lift them up. And it's like, no, they're not buried, the entire mesh has actually come up. So you want to go and fix it.
This piece of time here, the tutorial time, is going to be us working on our thing.
Yeah.
With you guys hovering about
Yeah.
to mop up the tears.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah, we'll bring a box of tissues.
okay, well, I can see there's going to be lots. So, the fact that it's only an hour and a half, because there's not very many of us, can we come in a little bit early? Could I come in earlier and just,
You can stay a little bit later.
can I stay later?
Yeah, if you have to. But I mean, you can always come and hassle me anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not doing the paper afterwards. I'm
All
doing
right.
contemporary because I decided this was probably going to be quite a challenge for me to learn.
Yeah.
And I needed
The best thing to learn
stuff.
is just play with it. Just keep playing. And don't start working on your assignment
No, because I don't even
because you'll make it. Yeah, you'll make a few mistakes, and then you've got to live with it for the rest of the assignment. So just get in there and just start playing around with it. Go and play with the mesh. Yeah, manipulate points. Yep. Oh, actually, sorry, there is one other thing I should show you all. If you make a contour that you do not want, okay, so I've got nothing selected now. If I click on that contour, I select just the contour. See that? I haven't selected the whole mesh, and I can go delete. And I can delete that one contour. Okay, if you want to get rid of a point, see I've got this like point here and I don't really like it, I can grab him and move him to his neighbour, and I've effectively deleted him. Okay, so you can either drag a node to his neighbour and he'll disappear, or you can select an entire contour. So if nothing selected, click on that. Okay, you can go delete. Boom, it's gone. Okay, now the only point that's left is that one that I defined. All clear as mud? Quarter past. Excellent.
Because how would you make contours for a hole?
Contours. Oh, you want to make a hole.
How would you make a hole?
All you need to do is make a hole in your mesh, or draw a shape. So you select your mesh.
Yeah.
You got two ways of doing it actually. In this case, it's quite easy just to draw a shape. So select the mesh.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it's not a nice even shape, is it? But if you just go back to your mesh tool, cool, and yeah, we want a polygon like that. That's excellent. And then just draw a shape around inside there.
Well, you draw like a circle.
Yep. Well, you can. Yep. In fact, what's probably easier if you grab a square, right?
Yeah.
And you draw a box around that whole pool.
Just like that kind of thing.
Yep, just like that. Cool. And go create hole. And go okay. And then if you click on the edges,
Like
yeah,
that
on the corner, yeah,
Yeah.
and go fill at the corner,
That one there.
yeah, with probably the next one,
Oh, that one.
yeah, probably about 2 meters. So you go 2,000, just to stab. Oh yeah, close.
Okay, yeah. Yeah,
You can, yeah, and you can grab those nodes and move them now as well. Anyway, yeah. You didn't actually have to change tools then.
Oh,
So-
didn't you? Oh, okay.
and just go, no, don't go okay, because you're putting 1 millimeter radiuses on those corners. Go cancel if you don't want to do it. So then you can move it in a bit. There you go. In theory, that should be smack bang on top of it. Oh, you want to round that one off? Yeah, and away you go. Sometimes, there's many ways to skin a cat.
Pardon?
There's many ways to skin a cat. We could do, later on I'm going to show you how to do solid element operations, so we could subtract the pull from the ground. Yes and no. Yeah. Oh, it's lovely.
The door's a bit too big.
That's alright, you can make the door smaller.
Not that wall is only like 1 meter high.
I think I'm going to end the recording there as well.